I'm Steve Staeger. On February 15th, RTD's police chief will present an update on his department to the agency's elected board. He's expected to tell them about plans to grow the transit police department threefold by the end of this year. This plan comes as riders have expressed a lot of concerns about illegal activity on RTD's trains and buses and at stations across the system. Just last week, we showed you video of a random attack on a light rail platform at rush hour. The chief insists that crime is actually down on the system from highs during the pandemic back in 2020. But he's still recommending security upgrades, even a bold plan to change infrastructure to make sure that more people are paying to ride RTD. I sat down with Chief Joel Fitzgerald on February 13th. Here's our full, nearly 30-minute interview on the state of security on Denver's trains and buses. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. I'll just start with a general question. What's the state of crime on RTD right now?
RTD, in general, throughout our system, the crime, especially violent crime, has been down. There's been, like many other jurisdictions out there, we have a metropolis that we service, obviously, with the 40 cities and 8 counties, 3.08 million people in this Denver region. We are looking at trends and evaluating trends from many different perspectives. But from what we've seen, at least on the transit system in our environment, we've seen a decrease in crime, and that's a good thing. However, we just can't be satisfied with driving some crime down. I think the objective is to make sure that everyone in the viewing audience understands we're really dedicated to working hard towards driving crime down and making it objectively noticeable. And I think that, 2023 and beyond, you can look forward to seeing more of us, more police officers, and understanding that we just want the same safety and security that I think you and your loved ones deserve when using RTD as a mode of transportation.
Curious to pick your brain about this. You see the numbers go up in 2020,
yes,
right around the time of the pandemic. They've trended down. What was it about the pandemic in your mind that kind of changed that aspect of crime and emboldened folks?
It's the closest thing to the actual depression that we've seen in our lifetime. You've got people that were in confined environments for such a prolonged period of time, dealing with the loss of family members, loved ones, friends, coworkers, not knowing what the future was going to look like. There was just a cacophony of different things colliding at the same time that led to, domestic violence rising, that left, noteworthy, marks in historic trending as far as violent crime has been concerned. Now, have we seen since then a decrease? We have. Have we seen a higher decrease than we anticipated? I think we have. But nonetheless, we still owe it to our customer to do a better job. And I think that's what you're seeing in RTD moving forward.
We'll talk about the perception of that, because I
Sure.
talk to a lot of folks who say RTD feels unsafe. They say, I see instances of crime. We did a story on Friday, and I got a bunch of email from people who said something similar happened to me. Why does the perception not match the numbers?
I think that could be said for any jurisdiction, even, with RTD being sort of a jurisdiction that covers the 40 cities and 8 counties. Any jurisdiction is going to see and feel things when they see and feel them, not necessarily for the prolonged period of time of a 24-hour day. What does that mean? Well, when I ride one of RTD's modes of transportation, do I see somebody using marijuana or using fentanyl? Or you may see that, but that doesn't mean that, we're not dealing with it. It doesn't mean that we're not conscious and trying to make every effort to make the passenger experience or the customer experience the best. I think what it says is we need to do a little more. What it says is there's a culture that's been accepting of these types of aberrant behaviors. And that's one of the things we're trying to deal with in the long run. We're looking at how we can make the customer experience friendly for everyone. If you're a customer here at RTD, should you sit next to someone that's using drugs? No. Should you sit in or around someone that's acting out or is violent? No. I think we can all agree that these are things that we don't want to be exposed to, especially in a public transit environment. So the changes we're making and the things that we're doing are more towards making sure that you're less likely to see those kinds of behaviors in RTD. They're incremental, but I can tell you nonetheless happening.
You've been on the job 6 months, and most people get a year before their performance evaluation. But what have you been able to achieve in that 6 months so far? Like, what changes have you made to make it a difference?
Well, we have to win wars, one war at a time. We talk about how vast the system is, but we've made some changes in the system in our critical hubs, from being more visible in our Union Station environment, making sure that safety and security measures on trains and buses actually are visible to the passengers out there. We're not perfect, we don't claim to be, but we're making a concerted effort to increase that visibility. And it's in line with really what our peers have said would increase, the, I guess you could say, transit welcoming environment that we're trying to foster. We had a peer review. Our peer review said we need to increase the amount of sworn police officers that we have and to draw down the number of security staff. And we're doing that. We're hiring aggressively and attempting to sort of match our peers out there and what resources they dedicate to public safety in the transit environment. So we're doing a good job with that. And I'm very proud of the fact that we're becoming a destination for hire for those that just want to see some change in that transit system.
Talk about aggressive. I looked at your plan. I mean, you want 70 officers. You're at 22 right now, 70 by the end of the year, and 140 by 2025. And all I could think was, like, in this era of law enforcement recruiting, how do you get that done?
Well, some might say unrealistic to a certain degree. I won't. I'll tell you that we've seen a tremendous increase in the amount of people that are applying. We are processing people, I'd say, at a pretty good clip. Now, in the past, RTD PD, that is, didn't traditionally target folks that didn't have police experience. We ventured out into now attracting those that are interested in becoming police officers, interested in serving RTD customers, and now putting them through the police academy. So a lot has to do with the change in what we've looked at as far as who we want to be part of this RTD family, but moreover, people that are willing to work in this transit environment and understand what you're going to deal with every day and want to do it. And that means if we have to train you from being someone with no police experience, we'll do it. But the dedication from the top down in RTD has been to dedicate ourselves to expanding our presence as a police department.
Talk about dialing down on contract security and building your own police force, a bigger police force. What's the difference there? What makes the difference in having a sworn officer as opposed to a contracted officer?
It really boils down to respect and the amount of enforceability, if that makes sense, and what you're able to achieve. It's great to have a security guard and a security presence in our system. I think for what they're given, our security folks do a fairly decent job. However, some things require a professional police response. We receive the type of training and de-escalation and other areas that are critical pinch points. I think we'd all agree in seeing since what's happened over the last 3 years or so, and what can be lost in terms of equity, what can be lost in terms of procedural justice in the community if someone that is a police officer or representing safety and security gets it wrong. RTD is now investing in making sure we try to get it right. We're not perfect. We're not saying that we will be perfect, but what we are saying is that there's more of a commitment, I think, in hiring and nurturing our own police environment and ensuring that this is a system that when you wear an RTD badge, you get the respect out of the customer and you get the respect out of the people that would act up or act out in a situation that would expose you, the customer, to something that you didn't sign up for.
You talk about behaviors and the kinds of tough behaviors you're seeing on the system right now. You want to update the code of conduct and
Yes.
add a couple things to it that would kind of try to keep people from riding the train all day, keep people from kind of lounging at some of the stations. I know you're bumping into some people who are saying, isn't that just criminalizing homelessness? How do you respond to that?
I would tell you I'm bumping into more people that are really intent upon making this a welcoming environment. I think there's a difference between being firm and fair and then being firm and fair and being a place that is ill-equipped to deal with some of the social problems that we're dealing with. The transit environment is not the environment to deal with the problem of people being unhoused. It just isn't. Public transit is just that. It's you engaging with the transit environment to go from one place to another safely and securely. Now, some would argue, well, what are folks doing that are staying on trains? Well, let me give you an example. If you're in an airplane, do you have to deboard the aircraft when you come to your arrival spot, or do you get the ride, back and forth as many times as you like? It may sound a bit crass. I don't mean to come across that way. What I'm trying to get through is that the customers in this environment expect that other paying customers are in this environment. And what happens is, instead of steering people toward the services that they need, which we're doing a better job at, I think, we were just housing a problem or hiding a problem. And in conjunction with Denver and other partners in the whole community here in the city and county of Denver and the surrounding metropolis, we've just tried to do a better job at connecting people with better resources, not making the train, the bus, the light rail the place to house individuals that have nowhere to go. There's nothing criminal about wanting to ride a bus and to see the sights in this beautiful area. I wouldn't have moved here if I didn't think it was beautiful. But with that being said, we all know that the environment can be and can foster bad behavior. And the objective here is to eliminate the bad behavior, not to over-criminalize anyone, not to be insensitive. That's not the objective. The objective is when you and your family ride a train or a bus or light rail, that your intent is to go from one place to another, not to get into fights or not to inhale any noxious odors and not to potentially be the target of somebody who's going through a mental crisis. It's really not the place for that. So if we can connect more folks with better resources and do a better job at that, I think RTD is in a better place, and that's what we're trying to do.
Knowing that you can't be everywhere and your officers can't be everywhere, How do you harden the system to prevent some of the crime like that light rail attack that we saw just a few days ago?
Part of it is just that. You mentioned hardening. We engage in something in policing called crime prevention through environmental design. Part of it is, are you paying customers, dealing with other paying customers from the beginning? And when you have an open system and an open environment that sort of operates on trust as opposed to operating on a paid fare system, those types of tweaks matter. So if you don't allow from the very beginning people to go past a certain point that is a paid fare area, those types of changes can help reduce the amount of crime and can really limit the access that criminals have to people who are just trying to enjoy a safe transit environment. Making infrastructure changes is part of an overall plan that RTD has. Some people have made things out to be that RTD is just out for profit and, we don't care about the community. Without the community, RTD can't function. But with that being said, you have to have the confidence that RTD is going to provide safe, secure transit services and a transit environment for everyone. And that means sometimes preventing those that have no business in the transit environment, preventing them from getting into the environment altogether.
But some of your stations are wide open. How do you prevent that? Like you and I talked about this. I remember the first day that you were hired, the infrastructure issue of you've got a platform where anybody can walk up. Like how do you harden that and make that safer?
Part of it is mere presence, and it goes back to making sure that you have a safety presence, whether it be police, whether it be some security, or whether it be having good audio and video and that the environment seems to that person that intends to do something wrong that you're being watched, right? So part of it is that. But the other part is ensuring that, from the top down here in RTD, one of my first instructions was to work with our entirety of our planning group to ensure that we install an infrastructure that is conducive to just that, cutting that environment down to your paying customers, to those people that are entitled to use the privilege of public transportation. And, that's coming along. I'm not saying that things are happening overnight, but a big part of what our plans are for RTD insofar as public safety is ensuring that the transit environment is locked down. It goes back to, can you go to the airport and just walk through to a gate without going through TSA, right? We've all become accustomed to this environment, but it seems like in public transit, people don't want to accept some of the changes that we've accepted over the last 20 years as being just par for the course and to maintain a secure environment.
That takes money. How are you going to get that done? Money is something I know you don't have a whole lot of.
Indeed. I can't answer, really how much money it's going to take to secure this environment. I can tell you that, we have projects in place, architectural, drawings of how we can facilitate a better infrastructure for security at certain hubs. So at this point, it hasn't come down to a number, but what it's coming down to is a willingness to move in that direction, a willingness to look and see what it's going to cost, what the designs would look like, and how friendly this environment would be. And just like so many across the country, there are transit environments that are welcoming and safe for everyone. They're not perfect. We don't, again, allege to be perfect, but we have to take the significant step to try to lock this environment down and ensure that we're treating our customers fairly.
What would you say is your biggest challenge in that, right? Like, what's the hardest thing to get done?
That's an interesting question. I think internally, we're serving many masters as police and public safety. We have our own employees that are exposed to altercations with people that are sometimes not paying customers. And you're going to make entirely, everyone happy. We can't possibly do that, but what we can do is care. What we can do is dedicate the kind of resources necessary to grow it into a department that's able to better handle, the different problems that we see in the different areas, right? I'll give you an example. One of the core changes that we're making is we're putting 5 police commanders in our 5 regions. And what they will do is have personal responsibility for the rail, bus, and light rail systems within their particular regions. They'll have their own teams to work in those areas. They'll be able to create their own plans to attack the problems and to solve. The expectation is solving the problems in the different areas because no 2 areas are the same. When you look at downtown Denver and Civic Center, they have a different issue than Boulder, Table Mesa, or 9 Mile. I mean, we've got different strokes for different folks in different parts of the community that mean something to the people that are, availing themselves to use of the system. So we've got to be more creative and allow our people the latitude to tend to what I call the slice of God's green earth each one has. In the past, we attacked problems in a format I call whack-a-mole. We went and knocked out a problem in one area. When a problem festered in another, we just shuttled down to that next area, and we tried to knock that one out. And guess what? The one we left reoccurs again. We need lasting, sustainable change. And the only way we have that is investing in ourselves, growing this department to the size of one comparable in other cities that, have a welcoming transit environment and sharing some of those best practices. And we're doing that.
What is your message to folks who are hesitant to ride the system, who've seen something they didn't like, or who've seen a headline that they didn't like? What do you say to them to assure them that it's safe to ride RTD?
In many ways, seeing a headline or seeing something aberrant behavior-wise on the train system is almost, I'm from inner city Philadelphia. I've seen everything on the train, in the train system and in the environment. Our system is relatively safe. Our system is one that we dedicate resources into, and you may not see a police officer on your train every day or on your bus every day, but that doesn't mean that they're not there. That doesn't mean that we're not watching. It doesn't mean we're not making an investment into your safety and security while using RTD. So what I would tell people is give us a chance to make sure that, as you've introduced leading off in this segment, you talked about how crime's down, but most people don't know. And I'm using this as a means to say that incident you see might be just a microcosm of the overall safety and efficacy of the system. So take it for what it's worth. When you see something, yes, we want you to make a call. We want to address it, right? But odds are, when you call and we get out there to address it, if you're not there, you never see what happens beyond your call. What I can promise, and what I try to stress when I speak to groups of folks that talk about the safety of the system, is that this new problem-solving method that we're using, where we're not just going from one problem to another, we will try to create a sustainable atmosphere by attacking those problems holistically. That means partnering with the city and county of Denver to provide better social services for those people that are unhoused or addicted to illegal narcotics or suffering mental crises. We've got to, again, or I should say, the customer should understand that we are doing more to work with the community to try to make sure that your trip from point A to point B or back, is one that you're not going to be affected by some of the things that you've seen in the past. And maybe you may leave by saying, hey, you know what, that RTD ride was better than it was the last 3 or 4 times I took RTD. As a matter of fact, I'm noticing a change. What I can tell you is that I get emails from people that say they noticed the change, or that say, we want to see more of what you're doing now. And that's great. I hope that by you doing this interview, we're able to communicate that, throughout this metro region. Give us a chance to solve these problems. Give us a chance to create sustainable change, and I think you'll see a system and an environment you can be proud of.
Great. I noticed in your presentation there was a note from someone in the West Colfax Neighborhood Association.
Yes.
Have you put security in that station? Is that like a permanent thing? I saw that listed in that note, and I wasn't sure if that's a solution we're going to see at more stations where you see a problem.
It goes back to your approach at each station. We have invested some more resources in that area. I've personally been out to those 2 areas that you're referring to, and I was dissatisfied with what I saw very early on. So part of that and obtaining the feedback from people from that neighborhood was, well, what did they want to see in an environmental change? And upping the safety numbers that we have out there with security folks, making more frequent stops and checks, ensuring that people aren't using narcotics in an open air narcotics market. Yes, that's a significant change, and it took an investment. But we got to win these wars. We can't just eke out little wins and little battles. This entire war throughout our system, if that makes sense, has to be won incrementally. And just throwing resources at something without making it sustainable is, I think, just an act, it's a foolhardy act, really. And what I have to say that email really elicited a great response, not only from the folks that we have working safety and security, but from our police folks as well, and internally, because these have been traditionally areas that have been inundated with narcotics activity. And to hear some of the people that have gotten off at that station and notice, the effects of some increased security measures, it really does, make you feel good. But with that being said, we can't be happy with just that. We have to make sure that we can adopt similar strategies and strategies that work for the particular areas that we're talking about throughout the system, that work for that particular area. In that case, it's working for that area. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but it's working. And as our commanders, take their areas, and as our department grows, I think you'll see more tailored solutions to problems in each one of the environments we serve.
I want to ask you very quickly. So we did the story on Friday about, it looked like 4 kids kind of get off a train and
Yes.
they wait for somebody. I heard from someone else who had a similar situation where someone got off the train and waited for them, and there was an assault there back in May of 2022. Have you noticed like a trend in that kind of aggressive behavior, and is there anything you're doing to try to stop it?
Well, it goes back to one of the first things you spoke about, and that's what have we seen trend-wise, since 2020. Unfortunately, we've seen that now in two separate areas in our system. But bear in mind, we're talking 40 cities, 8 counties, and I will tell you that I think your average RTD customer is not the target of randomized attacks by groups of juveniles in our system. Again, having grown up in other areas of the country where I've seen the incidents of things like these happen, I can tell you that RTD in particular is not seeing any more than anywhere else in the country.
Chief, what am I forgetting?
I don't know.
Is there anything, with your plan, anything else you wanted to touch on? I know expanding the department to 140 officers by 2025 and an awful lot of like infrastructure. Like you want to build a police station. And
let's talk.
Sure,
MARTA, for example.
Yeah. Just
today, there's an article. I don't know whether you saw it or not, but there's an article about MARTA PD and showing that there's a decline in officer assaults. in operator assaults, and there was a decline in overall crime in their system. Now, when you compare, what MARTA in Atlanta, what their, public safety infrastructure looks like to ours, you've quoted our staff numbers, and you look at them having upwards of about 500 individuals that work for them. We're driving crime down creatively, and I mean really creatively with the tools that we have at our disposal. And as we grow, I think you'll notice again that the investment in the sworn peace officer, and I call us peace officers because that's what we are. We should be keeping the peace. You don't have to necessarily effect peace in actions. It's mere presence sometimes. And I think what you'll see is as we grow, that concurrent with the size of other agencies that are nationally represented in the transportation protection field, right? I think you'll see and be able to expect an environment that's even more, how can I say, or less susceptible to seeing that kind of crime happen. And it's safe to note that after having the APTA peer review study done and having public safety peers from throughout the country come and look at our environment and say these are your needs, RTD has been very, very responsive in addressing those needs, incrementally. Should keep an eye on how much the system changes as we grow.
Great. Thank you so much, Chief.
You're
really
welcome.
Appreciate you taking the time.
Anytime.